section. Welcome to the shading course in the Art and Science of Figure Drawing series. I'll be your instructor, Brent Eviston. Light and shadow are some of the most dramatic elements that you can bring to a figure drawing. A drawing that contains both crisp lights and deep shadows is one of the most dynamic experiences a viewer can have when looking at a figure drawing. Understanding light and shadow is how you bring a true sense of depth, realism, and three-dimensionality to a drawing. Now, the process of shading involves rendering three-dimensional form using a range of values from the brightest lights to the darkest darks. Shading is what makes the difference between a flat-looking shape and a three-dimensional one. Shading gives the illusion that the paper is not just flat, but contains depth, and within the depth of that paper, a figure actually exists. It's a powerful illusion that every figurative artist must master. Now, this first video is the orientation. In this orientation, we're going to start with a course overview to give you a sense of what you're going to learn in this course. We're also going to go through setup and basic materials, and we're going to cover some key concepts that you need to learn before you begin the lessons. Well, let's get right into it with an introduction to shading the figure. I think that a good figure drawing has three different elements: gesture, structure, and shading. First, let's talk about gesture drawing. Every good figure drawing begins with a gesture drawing. A good gesture gives the figure a sense of dynamism and energy. Gesture is expressive. It simplifies the subject instead of focusing on details. A good gesture drawing ensures that the figure maintains a sense of action and excitement no matter how many details you draw over it. Gesture is what will make your drawing come alive. But a figure drawing also needs to have a deep sense of structure. A good structural drawing simplifies the figure into a collection of three-dimensional volumes. These volumes can include the sphere, the cylinder, the cube, and the ovoid or egg. The structure of a figure drawing is what gives it a sense of three-dimensionality, as well as giving the illusion that the figure is occupying deep space. Gesture and structure combine beautifully to give the figure a sense of believability and life. The final element of a successful figure drawing, and the focus of this course, is shading. By understanding the basic volumes of the figure, and by understanding how light and shadow operate on these volumes, you'll be able to render even the smallest details of the figure using dramatic light and shadow. Of course, the figure is an incredibly complex organic form. But with the tools and techniques you'll learn in this course, you'll be able to understand and shade even the more complex anatomical features of the body. So now let's talk about how to set up for figure drawing. This course includes a whole series of photographs of nude models lit with a single light source. These kinds of photographs will be perfect to draw from. Now, I'm usually drawing at an easel, so you can see behind me I have my easel set up, I have a drawing board on the easel, and I have a piece of paper clipped to the drawing board. You can also see that I'm working on an iPad. So I have the photograph that I'm drawing from pulled up. Now, of course, you don't need a digital device to draw from. You can print out an image and somehow affix it either to the drawing board or affix it to a surface that is near the drawing board so you can see it. Now, I usually prefer to stand while I'm drawing at an easel, but you can also sit. It's just personal preference. But this is not the only way you can set up to draw. Many students lean a drawing board up against the desk where their computer is, so they have their drawing board in front of them and the image that they're drawing from above the drawing board. Some students use drafting tables where they have their paper and their image that they're drawing from right next to each other. And some students just lean a drawing board up against a table. I encourage you to experiment with the materials that you have access to find something that works for you. So when you're setting up, you want to make sure that with your arm extended and slightly bent, you can reach the surface of the drawing board. You don't want to have your arm fully extended, but you don't want to have it really close either. And remember, you're going to probably be using the overhand grip, which is something I've demonstrated in all of my courses. So that means the drawing is going to come from the shoulder, not simply from the fingers. So you want to give yourself a lot of room when you're drawing from the shoulder. You don't want to be too close, but you also don't want to be too far away. Now, one thing that students often overlook, and is one of the most important things that you can do while setting up, is you want to make sure that your drawing surface is perpendicular to your line of sight, as well as the image that you're drawing from. You want to make sure that both the top and the bottom of the page are roughly equidistant from your eyes. If your board is tilted back too far and the top of it is further away than the bottom, that will create distortions when you draw. So again, make sure that your drawing surface and the image you're drawing from are perpendicular to your line of sight. So now that you have an idea of how to set up, let's take a look at some materials. Now there is some flexibility with materials. You don't have to use exactly what I'm using in order to participate in the course. But I'd like to take a few minutes and take you through what I am using so you can figure out what variation works best for you. Most of the drawings done in this course were on paper that was clipped to my drawing board. You can see the drawing board behind the drawing in this photo. I prefer to use a hollow wooden drawing board, but any drawing board that fits your piece of paper will do. Now I like to clip my paper to the drawing board. Here you can see an example of the kind of clip that I'm using. It's actually a kitchen clip. At the very top of this image, you can see that I have one on either side of the piece of paper. Many drawing boards, particularly masonite drawing boards, actually have clips already attached. But you don't have to have a board specifically designed for drawing. Any rigid flat surface will do. You can use drafting tape if you need to affix your drawing to the board. Next, let's talk about paper. Unlike many of my other courses, in this course you're going to be expected to start and finish drawings. This means that these drawings should be done on sturdy archival paper. In this course, you'll see me using 80-pound drawing paper. It's thicker and more durable than most drawing paper. This makes sure that it can stand up to longer, more intense periods of drawing, and it will make it last much longer once you're finished. Now, there are many great kinds of paper, and any brick-and-mortar store or online art store should be able to help you buy archival 80-pound paper or better. But as always, if you don't have access to nicer drawing paper, that's totally fine. You can use whatever you have on hand. Most of the paper you'll see me use in this course is at least 18 by 24 inches, and sometimes 19 by 25 inches. These are pretty standard paper sizes that you shouldn't have any problem finding. I highly recommend drawing on this larger paper so you can really get into the details without feeling cramped. But again, as with anything else, the paper size is ultimately up to you. In this course, you'll see me use both white paper and toned paper. The drawing seen here is done on a piece of light gray paper. You'll also see me do drawings on lightly colored pieces of paper. Now you're welcome to experiment with different tones and colors of paper. You just want to make sure that the paper you're using is neutral and lightly colored. You don't want anything too bright like reds or oranges. Light grays and tans are great to use. Now it's important to realize that on white paper, you will not be using white pencil. You'll be responsible for drawing all of the values seen. But when using colored or gray paper, you'll be able to use the white pencil to draw the highlights, and the paper will stand in for one of your values. You'll see me demonstrate both methods in this course. Next, let's talk about pencils. I draw using oil-based colored pencils. Now, many colored pencils are wax-based, but the wax in the pencils makes the color degrade over time. But oil-based colored pencils retain their depth and range of values. Now, because we're shading, you'll want your pencils to be dark, but they don't have to be black. In this course, you'll see me drawing using dark browns, grays, and even reds. You just want to make sure that your pencil is dark enough so that it reads as value instead of color. But you're welcome, of course, to do the entire course with a black pencil. There's no need to use more complicated combinations of colors if you don't want to. You can see that the pencil on the far right is a white pencil. This is used for highlights on toned or colored paper. And of course, if you're just using white paper, you won't need a white pencil because the paper will stand in for the highlights. But as always, you are welcome to substitute these pencils for whatever pencils work best for you or what you have on hand. There's no requirement to buy more expensive materials. Now let's talk about erasers. In this course, you'll see me using two different types of erasers: kneaded erasers and vinyl erasers. A kneaded eraser is a soft, pliable eraser that you can stretch and shape using your hands. You'll see me demonstrate a number of different ways to use a kneaded eraser in this course. Kneaded erasers are great for gently lifting pigment off of the paper. Vinyl erasers, on the other hand, are a harder eraser that can scrub a piece of paper clean, lifting nearly all of the pigment. Because they work so differently, it's important to have both of them, and again, you'll see me demonstrate how to use both of these erasers in the course. The last piece of equipment you'll see me using is a drafting brush. When using a vinyl eraser, it will leave a lot of particles behind. If you brush these particles off the paper with your hand, it will likely smear your drawing. A drafting brush will gently remove these particles without damaging or smearing your drawing. Now, one question students sometimes ask is, how do I sharpen my pencils? I just use an electric pencil sharpener, but a hand sharpener or a blade will work just fine. As you'll see once we get into the lessons, a long, tapered lead will work best for the shading techniques that I'm teaching. For an extensive list of all of the materials and equipment that I use, please visit my website, www.evolveyourart.com, where you'll find numerous resources, drawings, and more information about my courses. Now, there are a couple of things I want to talk about before we get into the lessons. The first is that this course focuses on what I call an optical form of shading. That means you're going to learn to observe the three-dimensional forms of the figure and render them using light and shadow. So we are going to address some anatomy in this course, but I'm not taking an anatomical approach to shading. Now, this optical form of shading does have many benefits, and the most important one is that you don't necessarily need to know anatomy in order to shade the figure convincingly. Now, I have spent many years studying anatomy, and I would recommend that you spend time studying anatomy, but this optical form of shading will allow you to render beautiful figures using light and shadow without knowing all of the technical anatomical details. So in this course, I would say we're going to address anatomy on an as-needed basis, but anatomy is not going to be the main focus. The next thing you should know is that this is not a beginning figure drawing course, and in fact, this isn't even an intermediate figure drawing course. What I'm covering in this course is for advanced artists. I'm going to assume that you have gone through all of my previous courses in the Art and Science of Drawing series, as well as the two other courses in my Art and Science of Figure Drawing series. Now, if for some reason you haven't gone through my courses, but you feel like you already have a really strong drawing foundation, here are the basic concepts that you need to understand before starting this course. I'm going to expect that you have a good understanding of gesture drawing, of how to do volumetric figure drawing using construction methods. I'm also going to assume that you have a very strong foundation in drawing basic volumes like cubes, cylinders, and spheres, as well as cones and egg shapes. And finally, of course, you need to understand basic shading. I'm already going to assume that you know the primary light and shadow conditions that we find on basic volumes. Just so there's no question about what you need to know before starting this course, let's take a look at a couple basic volumes, an egg and a cone, two of the volumes you'll regularly deal with when drawing and shading the figure. In addition to being able to draw these basic volumes, you need to understand how light operates when it hits them. So you should already be familiar with a highlight, which is the brightest part of a drawing where the light reflects off of the object and directly back into your eyes. You should also understand the center light, where, on the lit side of the object, the value gets lighter as it approaches the light source. You should also understand how to draw the core shadow, the dark band of shadow that is found on rounding objects. You should understand reflected light, where an adjacent surface reflects light back into the shadow. And finally, you should already understand and know how to draw cast shadows, including how the shape of a cast shadow changes as it casts over another volume. Now, I've covered these ideas extensively in other courses, but if at any time you need a refresher, I highly recommend revisiting the Shading Fundamentals course in the original Art and Science of Drawing series, as well as the Shading Beyond the Basics course. So assuming you're ready, let me show you how we're going to apply these concepts to the human figure. The first thing you're going to learn in this course is when your drawing is ready to be shaded. One of the most common mistakes students make is shading their drawing before they're ready. Being able to evaluate when your drawing is ready to be shaded is an essential but often overlooked skill. When your drawing is ready, you'll learn how to divide it into broad areas of light and shadow. The seemingly simple task is an essential step that will help you to keep your values organized as you add more and more detail. Next, you'll draw the core shadow, and in doing so, you'll start to add some of the complexity of the anatomy. Next, you'll learn to add cast shadows, which will be the darkest values in your drawing. From there, you'll move to the lit side of the figure and draw the center lights. This subtle step will add a new sense of dimension to your drawings. Next, you'll learn to draw using midtones, where some of the most subtle anatomical details will be rendered. Here, you'll learn how to analyze and draw any anatomical detail you can see. Next, you'll learn how to add the highlights, which are the brightest parts of a drawing that will bring it to life with shimmering vibrancy. And finally, you'll learn how to refine your drawing, adding any details or values you may have missed and refining the anatomy to the point where you feel the drawing is finished. Now, if at any time during this course you feel like you need to go back and get some more practice and experience on these more fundamental drawing skills, I highly recommend you do so. But once you have the prerequisites for this course, hopefully this course will open up an entirely new way of looking at the figure and shading it. Now, for those of you who have been with me, this is the culmination of all of the other courses I've done so far. It's all been leading up to this. And this is the first course where you're going to be doing truly finished figure drawings. Now, as always, practice is critical. Now, in this course, I'm not going to give you timed poses like in the first two figure drawing courses I did. I'm going to provide a wide range of still images for you to work from. This is so you can take your time and really render the form at your own pace. But just like anything in drawing, you must practice in order to improve. The more mindful practice you do, the better and faster you will get. Now, whether you've been a student who's taken many courses from me or you're a new student, I'm thrilled to have you here. So let's get into the very first lesson, preparing your drawing for shading.